Welcome back to Work More. We're going to be going over Saturday, December 12th slate. Before we get into that, we're going to jump right into Discord. Also, I need to find a new start screen. So if you have any idea of just I don't want to be showing y'all OBS the whole time. So I just noticed that I did not charge my battery, so we're going to try to make this quick. But official plays for today, then Friday, we had Murray State. It lost, unfortunately. We covered 2 points of value, but didn't get it done. And Iowa State first half team total under also didn't get it done. So we went 0-2, moved to 55% for the year, but nonetheless we have one play locked in for tomorrow. And yeah, let's get started. We're going to start here first with a really good basketball game, which will be the first of the day, 10 a.m. Florida State, Florida. I'm going to take Florida State minus 2.5. I think Florida State is getting, oh my gosh, can y'all hear that? All right, besides the point. Every single time I start the video, it does people playing music, or revving their engines. But Florida State minus 2.5. We're seeing some threes. I think that they're getting put into a quote-unquote letdown spot here. But I was really hoping that Indiana would win that game. But I don't think that Florida State is going to be too worried about a letdown playing Florida. And it's at home, I believe. It's just it's a good spot. I think that this should have been 4.5, 5, and so I'll gladly take the 2.5. Next, Notre Dame, Kentucky. I actually didn't like a side on this game. Both teams are pretty bad. We backed Kentucky already this year, and I will hopefully never do that again. And Notre Dame has been shooting the ball very well, and I think that's due to regress. So I would take the under 144. I think Kentucky has the talent to lock down Notre Dame, and I don't think Kentucky's offense is worth a crap. So Mississippi State, Dayton. I'm going to have to take Mississippi State here. I think that they're still getting a little undervalued for the losses or the loss early in the season to Liberty. They also lost Mississippi State, lost to Liberty and Clemson. Those were two really good teams, and they played bad in the Liberty game. So I think that this should have been a PK, and so I'll take the 2.5, maybe 3 points. We're not going to see 3, but I think this should have been PK. So any points, I think that's the side to be on. Tennessee, Cincinnati. I believe that Tennessee has to be the side here. They played really well versus Colorado, and my first thought was, did Colorado just play bad? So looking here, Tennessee really didn't shoot that well. Colorado shot very bad, but this was more of a dominance. Colorado won the rebound wars, as we assumed, but Tennessee's defense was able to turn the ball over a ton and never was down in this game. So I think that speaks more on Tennessee than it does Colorado. Wyoming versus Utah Valley. So I watched the Utah Valley versus Southern Utah game, and they lost by 10. We had Southern Utah minus 3.5, I think. It was a surprise that it stayed a 10-point game. They were a very bad team and shot and hit in critical situations to keep it a 10-point game. Wyoming played Oregon State to a really good basketball game. So I think that Wyoming has to be the side here, and 6.5 is a really good number. Actually, looking into this one, I don't want a 6.5, but if this fell down to 6, I really like this as a position overall. So we could potentially be on this one. So we have Auburn plus 7. I think that Auburn has a whole bunch of red marks to start their season. They went to an overtime game versus a pretty bad St. Joseph's team. They lost to Gonzaga by a good bit. Don't consider this too big of a red because Gonzaga is significantly the best team in the nation, and they had a bad game versus UCF. They also shot really well versus South Alabama and still couldn't cover, so I guess you could consider that a red mark. That being said, I think that those red marks have made this game, which if you took in the preseason would have been pick'em most likely, I would assume. And I just think that I had this line at 4.5, 5, probably more near the 5 side. Taking too much recency bias into how Auburn's played. They're still a good basketball team. And Memphis, they beat St. Mary's. It was a good game, but then the other games that they've played against top-ranked opponents inside the top 100, they haven't really played that well. So Western Kentucky is a really good basketball team, but they only scored 69 points, and then VCU they only scored 59. So whenever they see tough competition, other than St. Mary's, which St. Mary's, though a good team, they're not a great team. So I wouldn't consider that win even anything crazy. They did beat the brakes off of them. This was a really good game. But I just think that there's too much bias here, and I think this should have been a 5-point line. So I will take the plus 7 there. Next game we have is Clemson -2 versus Alabama. Unfortunately, I am an Alabama guy at heart, but I think that they depend way too much on shooting. And I don't think they have any form of consistent offense. They live and die by the shot. And they're a very fast-paced team. I think Clemson just brings an overall more round and bettable team. I think that Clemson is somebody that I would like to put my money on in comparing the two. Alabama has the potential to smack around Clemson, and I say in my short little notes, I said if Alabama shoots well, they win this game at 8-10. But that's a big if, and Clemson brings consistency. So where would you want to put your money in? And I'm going to go with consistency here, so I'm going to say Clemson -2. I'm going to lay the 2 points. Next, we have Oregon versus Washington. I would take Oregon -7. I think that Washington is in a bad spot. So they've played really bad basketball all year. And let's see, they just had Carter opt out, and it was due to reasons not basketball related. We're not going to talk about that, but he was their assumed leading player, their best talent on that team. And so for him to opt out pretty recently, I think it was today's Friday, I think it was Tuesday, they're just in a spot that they're going to have to find what they want to do. So I have Washington pulled up here. So they started the season off with Baylor. They got smacked around, unfortunate, but Baylor's a really good team, so don't think too much about this. Then they lose to Riverside. This is scoring 42 points versus UC Riverside has to be a question mark. Then they come into a Utah game, and we're going to highlight this one. They played not well at all. So this was a big game for me. In my opinion, they needed to play good there, and they did in Utah. I don't think it's that great of a basketball team, and they weren't able to do anything versus that team. So I think that this speaks volumes to Washington's season so far. And then they beat up on a Seattle team that couldn't shoot. I mean, it's Seattle. I would expect that score. So we're coming into an Oregon game versus an Oregon team who started the season off with a loss to Missouri, which actually has really impressed me. Missouri's a really good basketball team, and I had them undervalued. I was impressed in that game. But that being said, Oregon was missing their point guard. I think we've talked about this in a couple of videos now. But they were missing their point guard. They looked lost. They've got another recruit in. His eligibility got signed and granted, so he's playing. And they look good now. So I actually don't have anything pulled up for Oregon. Oregon lost to Missouri, but then they played a really good bounce-back game versus Seton Hall, who I respect, and I actually like Seton Hall. I believe they beat St. John's today. That line, so we posted this morning, St. John's +7.5, I believe, is what the video said. It dropped all the way down to 4, and 4 is a spot where I would have really liked Seton Hall. Did not lock it in officially, but 4 was the number that I wanted. And so Seton Hall's a good team. Oregon showed up versus them. They showed up versus Eastern Washington. And then they played Florida A&M, which is another cupcake game. So now they're going into a Washington game with UCLA. Look ahead, but not really, because it's on the 23rd. That is over 10 days. It's 11 days from then. And so I think that this game is what is on their mind, and they've had some cupcake games leading up to it. I just think this is a good spot for Oregon. So I would take Oregon -7 there, if anything. Next, if it'll load, we're going to go to the Illinois game. So this is going to be the game of the day, in my opinion. Illinois versus Missouri. Again, we just talked about how undervalued I had Missouri. That being said, I think that this is a little bit ridiculous. I think that Illinois -2, you have to be on Illinois. Is it a letdown spot for Illinois off of a really big win? Yes, it is. And would it surprise me? No, by no means. I think that Missouri matches up really well with Illinois. They're a very vet-driven, talented, big man group, and they're going to match up really well here. But that being said, Illinois is the superior talent, the superior basketball team, and I think this should have been 4.5. So 2 points, I'm going to have to go with Illinois. I wouldn't feel very good about it. I do think it's a really good letdown spot, and Missouri is a scrappy team who could get the job done. So I'm going to go with Illinois, but not too happy with it. Next, we're going to go to Winthrop and USC Upstate. I thought that this one was kind of funny, and in my notes I said, the first sentence, apples versus oranges. I don't think that this game should even be, there's no way that it should be single digits. I think Winthrop is a team that just beat Little Rock by 5, I believe, and UNCG they smacked around. So they are a team that has consistently this year beaten up on good teams, while USC Upstate, I actually have pulled up their KenPom. They lost to an unranked team, which means I believe that they're D2. I don't even know how to say this team's name. They lost by double digits. They lost to Furman, who is the most comparable team to Winthrop on the schedule so far. They lost by a significant margin, 28. I believe that's right, yeah. Eastern Kentucky, they got smacked around, 184. They're a decent team, but they run a really high tempo offense. I believe they're usually first, so they're third in the nation in tempo, but a very high tempo offense in Eastern Kentucky was able to put 95 on them. And Georgia Southern, not a very good team, beat them by 3. Georgia Southern this year, they just got beat around the face by Davidson, and I think Davidson is more comparable to Winthrop than most teams. I think that Furman's probably the closest, but Winthrop is a really good basketball team. They're high tempo. I think that they're going to be able to put up points just like Eastern Kentucky did. Tempo is something that kills USC Upstate, as you've been able to see, and I think the single digits is just a bit ridiculous. So I'm definitely going to take Winthrop -9 in this situation. Looks like it's going to go to 9.5. Yeah, this one's almost at 10. So it opened at 8.5, which was ridiculous to me. I think that Winthrop wins this. I had this line at 12.5. And so this is a really good spot. Finally, we have Belmont versus Lipscomb. I am anti-Lipscomb. I think that they're a really bad basketball team. So Lipscomb has been good in the past. They've been a good mid-major team, but this year I'm not buying it. So the reasoning is simple. So they played Southeast Missouri State twice. They lost the first time, which is pretty impressive, saying that Southeast Missouri State is 332nd in the nation. This isn't even what really catches my eye as this loss. More important to me is this win right here. This win is listed to me as their best win of the year. They beat a team that they lost to the game before, which is less impressive because I think it's hard to beat a team twice in a row. And more of a less impressive feat is if you click into the game, you can see, oh, my battery's clicking again, so we're going to make this quick. They scored 63 in regulation, shooting, 47%. So they shot 47%, could only score 63 versus Southeast Missouri State. What are they going to do versus Belmont? And I'll tell you right now, I think that is nothing. I think that this total is going to go under. I think 5.5 is a really good spot, and Belmont is a good lean of mine, so I'm going to go 5.5 there. All right, so a quick recap. Dang, can smack up on the screen. Why is my computer going crazy? Okay, so quick recap. We are going beyond, or our leans. Again, these are just leans. Take them with a grain of salt. Do your own due diligence before you play anything. We have we have one official play locked. It was a under that has moved a ridiculous amount, so I'm not even going to talk about it. Our leans are Florida State -2.5, Notre Dame under 144, Mississippi State +2.5, Tennessee -7, Wyoming -6.5, Auburn +7, Clemson -2, Oregon -7, Illinois -2, Winthrop -9, and Belmont -5.5 or under 149, however you feel like playing that. Again, these are just leans. There's a lot on this slate. This is going to be a really good Saturday of basketball. I cannot wait to just sit and be lazy and watch. So hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps us. We've gotten a good bit of likes in the last few videos. I believe we got 20 on the last video, which is insane to think about. I really appreciate you all. If you haven't already, subscribe. We're doing as much as we can to make these content and make these videos as good as we can. So if you have any questions, any feedback that you would like to provide, put them in the comments. I check the videos 20 times a day, every day. I love doing this. I've really enjoyed it. And so we're trying to make it as good as possible for y'all to enjoy it. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm out.